Good afternoon. I'm Reverend Shanti McCartney, and I welcome you to the Center for Spiritual Enlightenment. This would be a good time to check your cell phones. I think it embarrasses you more than us, but that's okay. It's all okay. It's all good. I welcome you today on behalf of the Larvey family as we join together and celebrate the life of Peggy, and also to acknowledge the eternal nature of the soul. Peggy was born into this world on February the 27th, 1944, and she passed from this realm on January 1st, 2023. Our opportunity this afternoon in memory of Peggy, who was a wife and a mother and a sister and an aunt and a friend, is to find healing and to be able to open up our minds in love, and also in the awareness and the presence of spirit. So let us pray. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, source and substance of all that is, we turn our attention to your presence within and between us, as we join together to honor and celebrate the life of one of your beloved. We acknowledge the presence of Spirit, the source of life and love, that which nurtures, guides, and supports us throughout our life's journey through space and time. We acknowledge the saints and the sages, the enlightened ones, who shine the light of compassion upon the path of awakening. Maybe learn something today that will help us heal and help us see what is most important in our lives, and encourage us to renew our commitment to love without measure. And may what is good and true remain with us and light the way of conscious living in this precious, precious time that we are given. May the prayers that we offer this afternoon bless all people and all beings everywhere. Om peace. Amen. As many of you know, Scripture can bring comfort and support during the time of grief and loss. I would like to share from the Western tradition and from Eastern tradition which both speak to eternal life. From the Bible, Corinthians 2, chapter 4, verses 18. Well, we look not at things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal. This scripture reminds us to take refuge in the spiritual nature of life, the unseen, the supreme truth, to make the distinction between that which is subject to change, which comes and goes, from that which is eternal and lasts forever. We acknowledge that there is one life, one power, one presence that manifests all that is. This is the source and the substance of everything. As the ocean is the deeper, changeless reality of its waves that continually move and change, so our lives express, moving out as waves from the ocean of spirit and then returning once again. And from our Eastern tradition, the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verses 22 to 25. The true self cannot be cut by weapons. The fire burns it not, water wets it not, the wind does not wither it. The self cannot be cut or burned or withered or wetted. It's eternal, all-pervading, unchanging, immovable. The self is the same forever. This self is said to be unmanifested, incomprehensible, and unchangeable. And with these two scriptures, our prayer and our hope is that this may bring some comfort in your time of loss. The soul naturally yearns to be free. And at the deepest level of our being, we seek to know the truth of our own nature. This yearning is often the motivating force behind our actions, our decisions, and our desires. So let us focus for a moment on the intensity of that yearning that was present in Peggy. And to recognize it paradoxically as a deep love of life. A yearning to be free, to help others to be free, and to be released from suffering. With the process of mourning the loss of a friend or a loved one, there naturally comes a time of reflection and self-examination. During this time, our memories are poignant. Our hearts are tender and vulnerable. And we sometimes discover a wish that things could have perhaps been different. Besides the loss of a dear one, we may grieve the loss of a dream, the sting of words said or left unsaid, or things done or left undone. This is a time for us to reflect in our hearts as life as a journey of healing, in which all that happens can help us grow in love and help us grow in wisdom. Our own healing and growth requires a process of letting go into life and all of its questions and unresolved mysteries. Let us open to the possibility of letting go of resentments or any kind of attitude that restricts our ability to love and to be fully present with one another. Perhaps we could begin by forgiving life for not being as we planned or for not being as we expected, or a willingness to forgive others who may have hurt or disappointed us in our life, and a willingness to forgive ourselves for what we should have said or done, or we said and perhaps now we may regret. Just breathe. letting go, letting love carry you. Feel that in your heart, open. At this time, Gerry would like to come up and share music that was close to he and Peggy.
Can everybody hear me down the back? Good. Okay. We have a family trust, and in that family trust, we both wrote out our wills. In her will, Peggy asked that she have a celebration of life. She asked that there be jazz music played at the beginning and the end of her celebration of life. And if you look at the poem that we have, that is in there, it refers to taking the ashes to the river. Well, Peggy asked that her ashes be scattered in two different rivers, in the Mississippi, where she was born in New Orleans, and in Yosemite in the Merced River. And she asked that we do it within a year. So we have a task to do. While in our adult life we were not religious, Peggy and I on Sunday mornings would often listen to sacred music. We would listen to arias and cantatas and masses and choral music, and we enjoyed that, and we would listen for a while and then turn on the jazz or some other music. But this piece of music in the last few years was definitely a favorite. It's a sweet, gentle, sacred song. So.
We now have an opportunity to share any stories or memories you may have about Peggy. We're going to start with her beloved husband, Gerry, and then followed by her loving brother, John. And after that, we'll open it up to others.
Yeah, if they could do that. It's pretty warm. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Gerry Larvey. I'm Peggy's husband. There's a lot of pages here, but it's big print, and there's spacing as well, so just to let you know. Thanks to all of you for being here to honor Peggy's memory and celebrate her life. Thanks to Reverend Shanti and Reverend Claire for their support in helping make this celebration come together. I also want to thank the many people who were supportive towards me and Peggy after her stroke. Her yoga teacher, Naz, who was so loving to Peggy. Her caregiver, Ruthie, who befriended Peggy and kept her smiling and laughing. The many of you who visited Peggy during that time, but especially Marta and John and Pam and Bill, who were so faithful in coming to see her. Her wonderful book group, women's book group, who let me join so we could keep Peggy involved. My son Nick, who visited, took my repair list and fixed whatever needed fixing in the house. And my son Matt, who helped us both by cooking regular meals and always lovingly helping his mother. Now here's our story, sort of. When I lived in Berkeley in 1973, my roommate Janet invited me to join a co-counseling class she was teaching. At the time, co-counseling was quite popular, and one basic rule of the organization was that co-counselors should not get involved romantically. That will become later, important later. At some point in that first class, I noticed Peggy. She was at the front of the room talking with my roommate. She was very pretty, articulate, smart, and unaffected. I immediately liked her and was attracted to her. However, it would not be several years before we became involved. During those years, I was friends with Peggy's brother John, who was a co-counselor as well. He and I were involved in politics, and we played racquetball together. Peggy and John lived in separate little houses side by side in South Berkeley. When I visited John, I would occasionally see Peggy. In several years, she and I had only had 1 or 2 counseling sessions, but on one visit to John's, Peggy and I arranged to meet. In the midst of that session, Peggy, not one to be coy, looked directly at me and said, "I like you." I like that too. In the context of our session, her meaning was clear, and it was clear that she was breaking the rules. I was momentarily taken aback. I quickly let her know I felt the same. We two rule breakers began dating and spending time together. Soon we were a couple, both of us very much in love. It was immediate and permanent. But falling in love is easy. It would be years before we were to become soulmates. Each of us had much work to do on ourselves to get there. Our relationship was not without its challenges. Peggy was a single mother, and I instantly became a dad when we lived together. We both wanted to marry, but whether or not to have children was a stumbling block. I come from a family of 7 children and wanted to be a father. But Peggy had developed Addison's disease. She was afraid that her body could not handle the stress of childbirth, and she suggested that we adopt. I was wary of adoption, and so we were at an impasse. Soon, though, I realized that no matter what, I wanted to be with Peggy for life. We were married in a Buddhist church in Oakland. The ceremony was quite normal and familiar, but in particular, I remember the words of the priest: "Help one another to be successful in your own way." The night of our wedding, Peggy told me that she was pregnant. She went on to give birth to Katie and later Matt. Happily, neither birth was stressful for her. Our next challenge was money. We bought a small house in Santa Clara when interest rates were in double figures. We had several loans to pay, and I had to get a second job for a few years. Peggy never complained about money, but rather the time I spent out of the house leaving her alone with the children. Eventually, interest rates dropped, and with refinancing, salary increases, and then Peggy's work as a paralegal, we got some breathing room. Still, we were both strong-willed personalities, and early on we had many power struggles and also disagreements over parenting. But we were also very, very committed to our marriage. During her paralegal career, Peggy capably managed 3 different law offices. She brought the same efficiency and organization to managing our home. I mentioned in her obituary that Peggy's father had owned a construction company in New Orleans, and she learned much from him. Peggy began to make changes first to our small home in Santa Clara and later to our current home. She decided on the many renovations needed, worked with the contractors, and redesigned spaces in our home. She constructed built-in bookcases around our fireplace and had the front of our house retrofitted with steel beams. I loved the changes she made, and I trusted her decisions completely. I was very proud of her. She was so quietly competent and assured. Need a drink of water. Peggy always had an air of self-sufficiency about her. She enjoyed solo hobbies, working with her hands and designing, completing detailed projects. She loved woodworking. She also learned how to make her own yogurt and later kefir. A few times a year she would make soap, but mostly she loved sewing projects. In an extra bedroom, Peggy set up a sewing room where she designed quilts and wall hangings and made curtains and clothing and costumes. When working on her projects, she was busy and focused, and she gained a lot of satisfaction and pleasure from them, as well as a deep sense of accomplishment. Peggy was crazy about animals. The kids had cats, guinea pigs, and hamsters. Cats were her favorites, and we always had 1 or 2 in the house. Our longest-lived cats were siblings who had been abandoned by their mother. At the time, Peggy's legal office was in a large Victorian in Santa Clara. One morning when she emerged from her car, she heard the pitiful cries of 2 small kittens under the house. She decided that if they were there at the end of the day, she would rescue them. Peggy brought them to Town Cats, a local agency, but the kittens were too young, and they advised her on bottle feeding them until they were older and then bringing them back. She and Katie enthusiastically took up the care and feeding of the cats, naming them Layla and Miles. After about 3 months, I asked, "So Peggy, when are we taking the cats back to Town Cats?" Peggy said nothing. She just stared at me with a gentle, amused smile on her face, indulgent in the way you would treat someone who doesn't quite understand, but you know that eventually they will. Layla lived for 20 years with us and Miles for 19. We have many pictures of Peggy sitting with a cat on either side of her. Layla especially adored Peggy and would climb into her lap at every chance she had. As the years went by, Peggy and I got better and better together. We were starting to live those words, to be successful in your own way. However, in November 2008, we lost our daughter, Kate. It was devastating. Kate had developed a mental illness and was hospitalized twice. After her hospitalizations, when she came back home, Peggy slept with her many nights to comfort her as she was frightened. After her death, we grieved with one another and attended a survivors of suicide group. In my work life, I was doing okay, but I was actually pretty numb. Peggy and I were very supportive of one another, and she knew that I was struggling. At one point, she sat me down She took my hand and she said to me, "Kate made her decision, but we're still here. We need to go on and live our lives fully." Peggy helped me to move forward through my pain, and it strengthened our love. And always we kept Kate in our hearts. When I retired in 2010, Peggy gave me a present of an REI book backpack and invited me to join her hiking group. For the next 7 years, we had many adventures. We hiked in beautiful places. We joined a group of bicyclists as well. We traveled in the States and twice to Europe. Also, we went to hear live jazz and attended plays and visited museums. We enjoyed our home more and more and loved hanging out on our patio in good weather. Also, although we both had separate friends and interests, we were together a lot. We had arrived at a very good place. For weeks and months, we lived in contentment. We didn't just love one another, we liked each other too. Peggy was always my romantic love, but she was my best friend as well, and we got enjoyment, meaning, and satisfaction from each other's company. Many of you know that Peggy had a stroke in 2017. At that time, Peggy was very active physically and socially. She loved her independence, being able to get into her little red Honda and just go when she wanted to. During the week before her stroke, she attended her Mahjong group, she volunteered in the Santa Clara Library bookstore, and she exercised in her yoga class. She and I rode bikes on the Bay Trail, and we hiked with our hiking group. A few days after our hike, she had her stroke and was hospitalized. I knew that things would change significantly for her. For every one of us, what happens to us becomes our life and our universe. While I had been a big part of her world, I was about to take on an even larger role. Peggy was so precious to me, and I was determined that she should never feel that she was facing this illness alone. I wanted her to know every day that she was loved and cherished, that she was safe and protected, that together we would find some laughter and joy in the days ahead. No one is a perfect caregiver. Occasionally I was annoyed or frustrated or angry. So was Peggy. I coached myself to do better. I apologized to her, and she apologized to me. And every night before we were going to bed, we reaffirmed our love. All through those years, Peggy kept her spirits up, and she worked hard to recover. She pedaled her exercise bike at home and rode her three-wheel incumbent bike out on the Bay Trail. We practiced walking across the backyard, and we worked with a yoga teacher. We had many physical therapy sessions. She was cheerful and laughed often. Peggy tried hard, but always looming over us was the fact that every passing year, the possibility of another stroke became more probable. And as the neurologist warned, that is what happened. Peggy is gone now, but it is hard to let her go. I miss her daily presence and her lovely femininity, her sweetness, her beauty, and her grace. I miss her laughter and her beautiful smile, a smile that could simply melt your heart. To her friends and family, Peggy was a fine woman, kind and smart, tender-hearted, authentic and loving. She loved many of you. She was wise in so many ways, and she made me and others around her better. She always tried to be her own true self. For me, my life has been so much richer. A second. For me, my life has been so much richer because of our love. It was truly an incomparable gift to be Peggy's husband and to be joined to her through the years in our hearts, in our minds, in our spirits. Thank you. Thank you again.
I'll start with this. Okay. Well, thank you for that, Gerry. It was wonderful, wonderful to hear that narrative and about your lives together. And just, I really appreciate it. So I'm going to go back to the beginnings, and it's about our family and Peggy and that family. So we grew up in a family of 5 children, with Sonny being the eldest, followed by Peggy, myself, and then Linda and Suzanne. It was a dysfunctional family, but it was not without its good moments. Our mom was not very good at expressing her love, and unfortunately, she directed much of her frustration and her anger at Peggy, even from a young age. But I remember Peggy as being kind, generous, and someone I could trust. And this is in an environment where love and trust were hard to come by. Years later, when I was in my 20s and back in New Orleans, I visited a friend of our parents, Liz, who quite directly brought up the subject of our upbringing, saying that because of Mom's inability to take full charge of us, raising us, Peggy became largely responsible for our care. This is when she was young, when we were young, and she spent a lot of her time especially raising Linda and Suzanne. Now, I don't know what that was like for Peggy, but besides it undoubtedly feeling burdened by it, but I hope that she really found a place where she realized that she was a loving person, and she felt good about herself and needed. And I think she did feel that, because I think it showed up later in life. So Peggy moved out of our house a couple of years out of high school. She was working at the phone company. A little bit later, she started taking classes at LSU in New Orleans, and she had a small apartment just off the edge of campus. And I was attending school there at the same time, so we got to spend some time together. I remember once going to City Park with her on a really nice day, and we were just sitting in the grass, enjoying some wine and cheese, and just talking about politics, family, the military draft, and the murky, the murky view of our respective futures. We had no idea where we were going, neither of us, but we'd like to talk about it. In 1970, Peggy moved with her first husband to Berkeley. She was 7 months pregnant with Nick at the time. And so I was living in Santa Barbara at the time, and so when Nick was born, I came up to meet him. And, it was a wonderful moment for her. It was really quite clear. You could see it. But it was amid the pain of a marriage that was already failing, which was really hard. So on a subsequent visit, I saw a light in her that I had not seen before. She had spread her wings, making new friends, and had become a really loving, caring mother. She took a carpentry class, and then from that, she built a play structure for Nick. It's just so like her, just taking things on, not letting anything get in her way, and she was going to do it because she wanted to do it. That wasn't in the script, but I thought I should say that. So It was really clear that life was getting much better for her at that time. So I moved to Berkeley a few years later, presumably because I thought my career opportunities would be better, and it turned out that eventually they were. But I think the real reason I went there is because I just wanted to be nearer Peggy. So Peggy was living in a collective household, and then she, as Gerry kind of referenced, she found this wonderful small 2-bedroom house, much coveted, for rent in Berkeley. It was perfect for her and Nick. But before she could move in, the house next door became available, same kind of house. And so she convinced the landlady that I should move there, and she convinced her. So I did. And we were glad because we could be there for each other but still have our own space. I was able to build a darkroom in my basement, which was precious for me. She was able to have access to my old car since I mostly bicycled to work, and that was precious to her. And we were able to share the ups and downs of our lives. Peggy, unfortunately, had been feeling unwell for a while, and she was getting little help from her physician and from the myriad alternative health practitioners who often gave her very bad advice. Suzanne had come out to visit us in the summer of 1976 after she had graduated from college. And the three of us planned to take a bicycle trip from Oregon back to Berkeley along the coast. That was ambitious, to say the least. Well, despite her not feeling well, Peggy was determined to come. And so we set out that September from Medford. We made it almost to Crescent City after a long, grueling climb. And it was there that she decided that she could go no farther. She had had enough. She insisted she was okay and headed home. Suzanne and I got back about a week later, and when we got back, Peggy was in bed. And she said she had the flu, she thought. About a week later, I got a phone call in the middle of the night, and she told me, she said she was convinced if she fell asleep again, she would not wake up. So I took her. So I hurried her to the ER at Alta Bates. And there was a very young doctor there, right out of med school, who really realized that this was a very serious situation, but without not much information. And but just on a hunch, he guessed that she had Addison's disease, which was pretty amazing because it's a rare disease. And he saved her. And she recovered, but she would have to take medication for the rest of her life. So Peggy had had more than enough struggles by that time in her life. She was now 32, 33 years old. However, it was at this time that her life had an amazing turnaround. And I think Gerry's referenced a lot of this in what he said. She got together with Gerry, someone who loved and cared for her. They got married. Well, they moved to Mountain View. They got married eventually, and then Gerry had gotten a teaching job there, and that's the reason for their move. They wanted to start extending their family, but the question was, how might this affect her health? Would it be too much? Addison's disease is fairly rare, and I think at the time the view was that anyone who got it would succumb to it eventually. But Peggy felt it was the right thing to do. So I remember so clearly when she called me to announce that she was pregnant. She was so excited. It turned out that the hormones her body was producing actually acted as a boost to her system, and she felt great being pregnant, and Kate was born. So she was right. She always just amazed me. And I was so moved by what she had accomplished, I wrote her a letter. I said, and I'm going to quote here, "You are a great American hero. Unsung, to be sure, but no less great. You've got one fine man for a husband, this whole new life, a house, and all you have created, and now you have created this wonderful new person, which is the ultimate victory. I was just so happy for her and just so really proud of her. So as everyone here knows, Peggy and Gerry would eventually create another life in Matt. And then they would all go on to have a full life of family, new friends, new pursuits, and adventures. Peggy had overcome a lot of challenging circumstances, a difficult mom, a failed marriage, and the Addison's disease. But she decided to set the tone for how she wanted to live, and she did just that. This is hard. One of Peggy's wonderful qualities was her sharp sense of humor, dating back as far as I can remember. That quality was still intact after her stroke, and she was able to catch even subtle comments and make some of her own. It was a delightful way to be with her. Peggy, you will be missed by all of us. We dearly love you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to share? Any other family members first, and then perhaps friends? Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, you can. Sorry to steal your show, Richard. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It's so good to see so many faces. Some of you I haven't seen for a long time, and so many memories with a lot of you, and some of you I don't know. One thing I remember about my mom, I was trying to come up with, a specific memory, and there's just so many swirling around in my head, from when I was a kid, spending time at the Von Drak's house and hanging out with Martha Plesha and hanging out with the McKettys, spending time at my aunts and uncles and with my family. The one thing I remember about my mom is how much she loved being with everyone. She had this smile to her, this warmth that really just communicated to everyone, and I would watch it happen. How much she cared, how much she enjoyed their presence, and how eager she was to see them, and how sad she was to see them go. She was warm, welcoming, kind, generous. She always thought of others before herself and thought of the community before thinking of her individual needs. That spirit lives on, and I'm so happy that after she had her stroke, so many of you came through and spent time with us and, spent time with her, and she was always so happy to see you there. She lit up and filled the room with so much joy. So thank you all very much.
Sweet Peggy. She was such a dear, sweet soul. And she was an anchor for me. And as John said, she just started when I was very young. She was my caregiver. And although I really don't have a memory of that clear in my mind, I can see it, though. I can see my sister, my beautiful big sister, dressing me, bathing me, feeding me, and making sure that I had everything I needed.
and playing with me. And then she would put me in the stroller and take me out in the neighborhood, getting me out of the house, which was important. I think that's why I love the outdoors so much, because she would get me out and show me the neighborhood. So I really felt her love, and we were deeply connected because of that. Even though she was 10 years older than I am, we had this really strong connection. But when I was 8 years old, Peggy left. And she, you know, she was a teenager. And I was like devastated. I longed for her presence. And I missed her terribly. You know, and she still lived in the town, right? She still lived close by, but I had a hard time getting to her. I mean, because of my mom, I think, you know, that was one of them. But as much as I could, I would go see my sister. And then she moved to California, and I went off to college. And soon as I finished college, like John said, I came out to California, out here, to be with John and to be with Peggy and to ride our bikes down the coast of California. And I wanted to study Tai Chi, so I stayed for a couple of years studying Tai Chi. And I just was able to appreciate her love and bask in her love and feel nurtured all over again when I was around she and John. And so I didn't stay in California. I went back to Louisiana, and I had my dreams of being there and what I wanted to do. But as many times as I could, I would come to California, because I love California, but I also really wanted to be close to them. I felt like my family had left. So, and I still had my sister Linda, but then she took off and went in another direction. And you know, but every time I came out here, I had that same infusion of love. And it was just, you know, it was my anchor. So we had some adventures. We had some sad times when she had the Addisons. And we had to struggle through some of the resentment that I know, and she shared with me, that she had about having to take care of me. But we got through that. And we ultimately, you know, affirmed our love for each other. And that was what was really dear to me. But the main thing I want to say is that, you know, and you've mentioned her sense of humor, we laughed a lot. Peggy is just, she was just amazing. Her wit is so sharp, and she was so intelligent. And so I want to share my last memory, as when I was here in September. And I loved when she'd finally come down the stairs with Gerry. He would bring her downstairs and put her on the couch. And I'd have to keep propping her up because she kept falling over, and we'd prop her up. And then we'd just sit next to each other, and we'd kind of, you know, and we'd just sit there on the couch. And it was just so wonderful being close to her, you know. And then Gerry would bring her, you know, after we'd have our meal or have the day, he'd bring her up the stairs and sit her in front of the TV. And we both loved All Creatures Great and Small. You know, we'd sit there and watch that, and that was great. But then he put on Eddie Izzard, this comedian that I had never heard of, and Peggy would sit there totally engaged with Eddie Izzard and laugh and catch on to every little joke he'd make. And I was just sitting there going, because most of the day, you know, she was kind of in and out, you know, but she was like so focused, and I was like, man, she is something else. You know, I just really felt her love of life and love of humor. And that was it. And, you know, and I was here for a little while, and then I was back home, and then I found out she was gone. So we had this dream, Peggy and I, of living together at some point, you know, being in the same town or maybe even in the same house, you know. And we had all these little fantasies, and so that's not going to happen now. But And I kind of knew they were fantasies anyway, but Peggy's right here, you know, and when I look at that picture, I mean, it's incredible, but I feel her so deeply in my heart. And well, I'm so blessed. And thank you, Gerry, for making this all so possible for me and for all of us. And John, and Marta, thank you for having me, because I stay with John and Marta when I come here, and with Gerry. So anyway, and I'm so sorry over the years that I didn't get to know her friends as, you know, as well as I would have liked to, because I'm sure her friends are beautiful people too. Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Maybe I just want to use it. That's all right. Yeah. So, hello, everyone. I'm Marta Blackbaker, and I'm married to John, Peggy's brother. And I want to just share some things that I admired about Peggy. So, she was a beautiful dresser, right? She combined color and design in a natural, creative way. And I have some vivid memories about things that she wore. Like, for example, at Gerry's retirement event, she wore this array of teals and blues, indigos and whites, set off by an artful blue necklace. I'm wearing blue today in honor of her. And at Thanksgiving one year, she wore an elegant, form-fitting black dress with a sparkly choker. Stunning. In recent years, she always wore bright-colored tunics and contrasting nail polish. She had a bold eye for artistic expression. And as has been said, she loved animals. She refused to eat baby animals, I believe, such as veal and lamb, and was 100% committed to good treatment of animals. Of course, she passed this on to Nick, to Kate and Matthew. We see this in Nick's dedication to his wonderful dog, Landline, and Matthew's fun and funny cat, Bean. And Kate was always loving on animals. One time when the Larveys came to our house for a meal, Kate and Matthew and our daughters, Gabi and Sophie, spent the entire day building a gymnasium for our hamster, Flip Flop. It was complete with slides, staircases, swings, and a maze, as well as delicious treats dangling from strings for the lucky little hamster. Another time, Peggy was most indignant with me because she said our dog Scouty's water bowl was dirty. FYI, it didn't take long for his water bowl to become filled with bits of grass and debris. But her point was well taken about the importance of good and attentive animal care. And it has also been said, Peggy was always ready to laugh. Up until the very end of her life, she was filled with good humor. One time, years ago, Peggy and Gerry met up with John and me at a B&B in Point Reyes for the weekend. We arrived after them, so after we checked in, we went in search of their room, and all of a sudden, we heard a lot of wild laughter and cracking up coming from down the hall, and we found a room with the door ajar, so we cautiously knocked and went in. And to our amazement, they were both jumping up and down on the bed as if it were a trampoline, laughing and giggling uproariously, so fun-loving. In essence, Peggy's good humor and good-heartedness went a long way and will always be remembered and deeply appreciated.
Anybody else?
Richard wanted
I think he was, yeah, he was.
Shortly after this picture was taken, Peggy found herself living in an 1895 red shingle house in Berkeley, built by the brother of the first socialist mayor of Berkeley, no less. And in this house was people from various seminaries. There was a woman from the Presbyterian Seminary and a woman from the Jesuit Seminary and a graduate of the Presbyterian Seminary that was an organizer of the Berkeley Peace Brigade, and myself from the Baptist Seminary, and this cute little baby, Nick, who, in the spirit of Berkeley's environment in those days, we said, well, how do we be progressive Berkeley people and support this young mother? I should get up at 5 in the morning and change this little baby's diapers and feed his bottle to him, which Peggy graciously accepted, which was good experience when I had my own children. I was talking to some of the Maggie's Farmites that are here about what was it about Peggy that made her so special to us. I said, well, was it that she was sort of the matriarch of this group of young adults in the process of finding out who they are, what they believed, what they loved, what they disliked? Or was it she was the older sister that we never had and always wanted to have? And I never came to a clear sense of it, but what I remember mostly after hearing both all the family speak so personally and tenderly and sincerely was that being with Peggy was joyful. Joyful. Her smile, the goodness of her heart, the caring that she showed in 1,000 ways. She made living in that house a wonderful experience for those years. And I guess I don't know if I can say more. I think that's where I'll stop. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Mary, and I'm a member of Peggy's book club, and there were several of us who were able to come. I owe my acquaintance and friendship with Peggy to Susan, who told me about the book club, and I've been attending the book club for quite a few years now. And Peggy was one of the joys of coming to the book club. As Richard said, Peggy was always happy and joyful and took delight in the world around her. And I think a little bit of that is rubbed off on me. I'm very grateful to Peggy. When I was going through various hip replacements and surgery, Peggy would come over and walk with me, and once when I was in bed, she gave me a foot massage. Peggy was full of loving kindness, and I'm very grateful to Gerry for continuing to enable us to have Peggy in the book club for at least maybe a couple of years or more. 5 years. We've been meeting at Gerry and Peggy's house, and it was always a delightful thing to do, to go and sit around the table, watch the birds, listening to the fountain, and being there with Peggy and with the rest of us, and seeing Peggy smile. Peggy had such a beautiful smile, and it was really her. It was just all about her. Gerry was also a very valuable member of the book club. I always wanted to hear what Gerry's comments were about the book. I mean, being a teacher and a principal, of course, not surprising. And he was always so full of hospitality, and that just meant so much. He always he would have sweets, and finally I said, please, Gerry, no more sweets. I can't control myself when I'm around sweets. So I would eat most of them. And not leave too much more for other people. And we watched movies together, and it was really wonderful to have Peggy's presence with us. The last time I was there, I hugged Peggy, and that is my last memory of her. The loving, caring person. And I'm very grateful to have had Peggy and Gerry in my life, and also the rest of the book club. Thank you.
I have another hip replacement. Thank you.
Hi, I am another Maggie's Farm friend of Peggy's. I came to Berkeley at 22, and Peggy was the grounded older sister in the world, person who made this rambling, big, unheated brown shingle place a home for us. And I'll always be grateful to her for creating one of these unusual spaces where everybody felt welcome, and she was authentic. So it enabled all of us to not to become adults, because we weren't. We were kids, we were struggling, we were figuring out what was life and who would we be in it, but she created a space that allowed us to find a bit of a footing, and over time, then we were able to go forward into the world. So thank you, Peggy.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alexander Hennessy, and bear with me, I don't have anything written, but just like any other high-quality trial attorney, I'm good at making a short story long and botching my closing statement. So I met the Larveys in 2002 when I was about 16, 17 years old, and I was a junior in high school, and I had just moved to Santa Clara with my brother, who was attending law school at Santa Clara University. And I believe I met Matt in the summer of 2002. And one thing that I could always say about the Larveys and about Peggy in particular is how generous they were. They took me in as a family, and they exposed me to a culture that I wasn't used to. I came kind of from a rough area of the east side of Gilroy, and to be exposed to different economic class and a culture of generosity and giving was completely different and eye-opening for me. And I just, every single time I would have trouble in my life, or if I needed something, the Larveys would come and to my rescue, and they would always help me out. And I want to thank you, Gerry, for that. It means so much to me. And I'll keep this short, but I want to talk about one of the characteristics that I know personally about Peggy, and that's her sense of humor. And I have a quick story, I met my fiance last year, and at the time she was my girlfriend. And obviously this was in 2022 when Peggy had already had her stroke, and so she had her health problems. But I introduced my fiance, or at the time my girlfriend, to the Larveys. And I remember we were sitting down in the living room, and I was explaining to her that this was my girlfriend. And, and she was so immediately said, well, somebody has to do the job. I just thought that was hilarious. and if I'm able to have that type of wit at any time in my life, let alone be in the later time of my life, I would be very blessed. And so I just want to thank Peggy and the Larveys for being a family and lifelong friend of mine. And I'm so blessed to be here. And I know most of us probably don't know each other, but to have Peggy collectively connect us in some way in one consciousness is just an incredibly great feeling to be here on a Sunday. And I'm so thankful to have met Peggy. And thank you for your time. And I'm just absolutely blessed to have had that woman in my life. She was like a second mother to me, and she's just an incredible human being, and the Larveys are just incredible people. And I would just say this, that although she's gone, I see this as a celebration of life, and to be able to have somebody like that in your life and have a pillar of stability when you yourself come from a volatile situation is just an incredible feeling. And I in a way have some of my success based on people like Peggy and like Gerry and like Matt and like Nick. And so thank you very much. I appreciate it.
One more.
My name is Bill Drysdale. I was introduced to Gerry and Peggy by Pam Lougheed about 10 or 11 years ago. And Peggy and Gerry were very kind to invite me to their entertainments. So I spent many happy hours in their company. I found Peggy particularly warm and welcoming, and she had a wicked sense of humor, very sharp wit, could see through pretense, but on the whole I found her very jolly and warm. Thank you.
Now we have another person coming up. It's okay.
So I'm Rodney Robinson, and I met Peggy one afternoon. I, at the time, was living in a commune in South Berkeley. That was my third commune in Berkeley. I had been, some years before, graduated from Berkeley, went to the East Coast, came back to Berkeley, and ended up this particular afternoon walking in the North Berkeley neighborhood, just one block from the university on Ridge Road. And I wandered onto this property, and it reminded me of a place I had known in eastern Connecticut, right near the Rhode Island border. That place was the headquarters of the Committee for Nonviolent Action, and from that location, civil disobedience was organized against the Polaris nuclear missile submarine that was being built in New London, Connecticut. And I happened to meet these people because I had joined up with the Boston to Pentagon walk. And after that walk, I got hired to help to organize what became the March on the Pentagon in '67. Long story, and fast forward, this place, what became in our minds Maggie's Farm, reminded me of that house out in Connecticut. There was no one there. The doors were open. It was a cute little place, an acre of land on top of Holy Hill. And a few days later, I came back, and Peggy was there. She asked me immediately, would I want to live there? You know, I don't know what was on her mind. I said, I would want to live here. She said, well, what do you like to eat? I said, I like to eat rice and vegetables. And for the next 2 years, our household, which grew, I think I was the 6th or 7th person to show up, our household grew, as I remember it, to 18 people. It was a pretty large house. We lived in, three of us lived in the attic for a while. That was our bedroom in this giant, full attic. Ricardo lived in a little basement room. We were just kind of crammed in. People would knock on our door, do you have any rooms to rent? No, we don't have rooms to rent. We lived there rent-free. And so if a person came in and asked, do you have any, extra space or, extra room? Yes, we do. And we just, people joined and we grew over this time period. And it became a lovely community. I think from our recollection, I think there are 5 of us still alive, and 4 of them are here. Peggy, I considered her to be the glue that held us together. She just a magnetic individual. I'm not sure if I can continue. Who really impacted our lives. After 2 years together, a situation occurred where we dispersed. And I didn't see Peggy again for 35 years until we had a reunion at John's house. And many, many, many times, we had a little, turntable. They used to have records back then. And we had, I think, 4 or 5 records maybe, but we played one particular record a lot. We didn't wear out the grooves, but the tune we played as a morning ritual was "Here Comes the Sun." And at the 35th reunion, we're hanging out in John's house. It's kind of foggy, cold, and eventually somehow we migrated out to the back porch, the big deck, and the clouds and fog started dispersing and the sun beamed in on us. Boom! We all just broke into "Here Comes the Sun" tune. And to this day, that is the only tune I have on my phone. Well, I was going to go somewhere else. So, I don't know, Peggy was an overwhelming influence in my life. And after the reunion, I had a number of phone calls, conversations with her on the old dial-up phones. I know some of you might remember those. After 4 or 5 calls, I don't know what happened to her number. I lost it, and so I wasn't able to ever really talk with her again. But I made efforts, I tried, I miss her dearly, and I'm so pleased that I'm able to be here this today, and thank you very much.
One more. Because here comes the slideshow after the speaker.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gabi Baker. I'm Peggy's niece and John and Marta's daughter. It's been really nice to hear everyone's reflections today, and hear about all these memories that I haven't heard, and hear these sides of Peggy that I maybe had seen but didn't quite have put into words. I wanted to share a memory of her from right before her stroke. I was going through a breakup and feeling very confused and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I remember just talking to her one day on the phone and just feeling her like listen to me and give empathy. And I just felt like she really like understood what my experience was. And it was just really special. And I am really glad in retrospect that I got to share that with her and just kind of talk to her like as an adult at that point. And I think in the last few years, what really stands out to me is just the like evident love that she and Gerry had for each other, and that was just so present every time I saw them and so clearly there and just felt in every moment of their interactions. So it's just, I think, clearly speaks to how she lived her life for her entire life. Thank you.
If anybody else does have anything to share, please do share it with the family, because everybody wants to hear the stories and the memories and what filled your heart. We are now going to look at a slideshow that the family provided.
And wake up when
So let us each individually reflect for a moment on the gifts that Peggy brought into our lives. And obviously, from all of the sharing, reflect on how many people were touched by her. And for all those who came in contact with Peggy, she expanded their capacity to love. And may all those whose ability to love were enriched by her continue to love Peggy unconditionally and to do what we know that she would want you all to do, which is to love one another. Now we have an opportunity to bless Peggy on her soul's journey. So I invite you to take a moment, close your eyes if that's comfortable. And in your own way, inwardly visualize Peggy as you remember her. Love knows no boundaries and makes no demands. We are not separate in love. We are all one in God's love. Allowing this life to be a gift and a blessing, and opening our hearts and our minds with compassion and tenderness and forgiveness. We inwardly bless Peggy on her soul's journey and know that she is now free. Beloved Spirit, as you have now drawn the soul of Peggy closer to you, may you also draw nearer to us. May we know your love, your strength, and your peace. May we be mindful of the blessings that have come to us through Peggy because we have known her. May we see more clearly, laugh more, and love more deeply. And may we also be deeply rooted in the spirit of divine presence. Om, peace. Amen. Gerry, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you all again for coming. We're at the end now. One of the lines in the poem is, there is never enough time. So go home tonight and hug somebody that you love. Okay? We're going to invite you out to the garden area. They have a beautiful, beautiful garden out there, and we have some refreshments. As I said, we are going to play some jazz music at the end. This will be a little bit more lively because, at the end of a New Orleans memorial or funeral, they always played lively jazz. Okay? If you did not get to share, if you look at the back of the program, if you send me a story, I've been collecting them. I've got some great memories of Peggy, and I'll be happy to share them with you. So we are going to hear some New Orleans jazz. And you can't sit down to do this. So stand up, and we're going to go out to the garden out the back. So, okay?
in that number when the saints go marching in. When the saints go marching in. When the saints go marching in. Yes, I want to be in that number when the saints go marching in. Get that camera. Marching in, when the saints go marching in. Yes, I want to be in that number when the saints go marching in. Peggy!